Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode here from Gwiglet, your one-stop shop for all things books, beards and beyond. We're going to be taking a look at the AQA A-Level English Literature specification today, particularly the unseen prose task. I'm going to give you 5 tips, and as always, I'd love it if you're able to hit that thumbs up button, be sure to share this with your friends and hit the bell icon for more updates. If you haven't already, Gwiglet is available on TikTok and Instagram, so be sure to follow us there. So, what can you do with this video? A couple of little hints and tips. First of all, be sure to take notes and ask a question in the comments. The Gwiglet guarantee is I do respond to every single question, and I will try to help you as much as I can. In addition, use this as a revision tool. You can either use this by yourself or with your fellow classmates. You can also use this to help build mind maps, or if you're asking questions or answering the tasks, you can use this to list examples as you go. So, my first tip, based on the examiner's reports, is to read, and read again. A thorough reading is essential to this task. Now, it's unseen prose. The nature of this is your teacher hasn't seen this. You are the first person to see this, so it makes vital sense that you check back through this. Make sure you read through multiple times where you can. Definitely check back through specific aspects to gain a greater understanding. Just like the unseen poetry aspect, you haven't seen this before, so it's vital that you make sure you take a look back through and read as you go. It's almost never worth mentioning other text within the essay either. They really want you to engage with what's in front of you. So if you happen to know the author or happen to know this text, that's great. But unless it's really vital, my strongest recommendation is to avoid that at all costs. Just read through what you have and comment on what you have. Now, my second tip, treat this as a text within a text. Now, you'll see in this next slide, I'm going to be talking through a few things I've gleaned from the examiner reports. I'll drop a link in the description below of that so you can read this in more detail. But what do I mean by this? I mean, read the unseen prose extract as a kind of island within a larger body of text. Now, the exam board are deliberately going to give you one you'll know. So, as they say here, better answers, while acknowledging that the extract is only a tiny part of a much longer text, wrote well about its internal structure and cohesion, for example, the beginning, development, and denouement. So what do I mean by that? They want you to appreciate that they have deliberately selected something that has a clear defined beginning, clear defined middle, clear defined ending. So it's important you understand that they're not just arbitrarily, randomly picking a little selection of prose here. They've deliberately picked something that is a kind of cog within a bigger machine. So appreciate it isn't the full story, but it will come with a defined narrative progression. And acknowledge that. Now, how do we acknowledge that? Use such phrases as the beginning of the extract narrative progresses or concludes. What I would call at GCSE tracking is always useful here because it has an acknowledgement of structure as well as narrative progression. Tip 3, devices. Handle these with caution, folks. What do I mean by this? Now, it's quite natural to be commenting on language techniques or devices. They're often, however, at A-level a sign of a weaker response. It's picking out these little idiosyncrasies and nuances, but they don't necessarily always add to the whole piece itself. So it's more about the journey the text takes than necessarily spotting unique, separate ideas, devices. There's often a real trouble that comes with that, so I'd encourage you to avoid it. For example, the examiner's report from 2022 said that weaker responses, quote, resort to feature spotting and can only offer a fragmented response to the text. So if you can see certain features and they don't add to the progression, be careful. If anything, you want to avoid them. Now, tip 4, my penultimate tip, context and the subtlety of this. Now, it's important to appreciate context always, but make sure you understand the difference between context of production, for example, the text as a construct of its own time and place, as well as context of reception, how we, the modern audience, perceive it. Really tread that fine line, that balancing act there, very delicately and carefully to get a more assured, effective mark. For example, the examiner's report says accusing a fictional character of holding, quote, archaic views and appearing to offer well-meaning advice on how to be more, quote, modern is a self-limiting approach to literary critical analysis. The examiner is saying here that ultimately we have to appreciate this is of its time and acknowledge that rather, be aware of that. But equally, it's not going to do you any favours to just comment on it as a modern reader without acknowledging the progression of the narrative and how this unseen prose develops. That's the most important thing. Also, the best ones use context in an integrated way. I've deliberately underlined that, an integrated way to develop literary interpretation. In short, if it's not developing your response, if it isn't improving what you're trying to say, avoid it. Don't mention it. If it has no better value than that, leave it to one side and focus on the more important things. And lastly, their view regards your view. Their view equals your view. Now, what do I mean by this? Consider how this narrative is shaped. You'll already see in my previous tip, I said how it will have a clearly defined beginning, middle, and end. But how do we perceive this? What lens are we perceiving this through? So, for example, is the text written in first person, second person, using you, your pronouns, or third person? And, whichever of these it is, what effect does this achieve on the overall narrative? That's always going to be vital, because you're always going to get some lens, some perspective by which to read this through. So it's important to make sure we have this. The examiner's report quoted as saying, students who could not recognise narrative viewpoint were disadvantaged from the outset, from the very beginning there. So it's very, very vital to make sure that you can understand and appreciate the narrative viewpoint you're being provided with. And in doing that, you are able to gain a greater appreciation, a greater mark, and ultimately a greater grade. Hope that has been useful for you all today. Thank you very much. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget, we are on Instagram and TikTok. Be sure to search Gwiglet right there for all your things, books, beards, and beyond. Until then, all the very best. Take care, and bye-bye.